Hey there! It is a Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video. It is incredibly hot and sweltering out here today. We did a grocery run because I'm back in town following some shorter videos that we had come out on the channel. Hey, that's no need to end the weekly in real life videos, right? Anyway, this week, we've got another gentle viewer submitted question. As always, feel free to submit your own. Helps me a lot if when doing so, you include a question mark. Makes it easier to Control F and find them. We got a big list of them, but no shame or no harm in putting more on there, right? Anyway, this week's comes from a person whose username should be in the bottom third of the screen right about now. And they ask, pretty straightforwardly, do I get most of my views from Morrowind Mondays? And yeah, that is a pretty, easy and simple and straightforward question, so we'll sort of roll this out into, we'll extrapolate upon that. We'll expand upon it. We'll go into more detail where we can, right? Obviously, there is some things that I think I'm not allowed to talk about, right? I'm never sure about it, and frankly, I'm kind of too lazy to look up the exact details of it. But we'll be vague enough, I think. Anyway, true enough, we'll sort of go by metrics that are current, right? Obviously, they vary as time goes on. Even from, there's always some degree of recency bias, right? So if there's a playthrough or whatever that we're doing currently, it tends to be doing also quite well, right? Anything that we're currently on is usually pulling in decent enough numbers, hopefully. But also there are weird fluctuations, for instance, a very big one that happened recently, and we're still kind of getting bits of it here and there, is when the Fallout TV show sort of had a lot of popularity. Obviously, the Fallout games also, had this great swell in popularity as well, but so too did everything else Fallout related, right? I assume anyone else making videos related to Fallout saw an uptick. Anyone sort of doing modding, anyone sort of, sites writing articles and stuff like that, podcasts related to Fallout. I assume all of that got a similar large bump, right? But, hey, we'll sort of go through it as it is currently, right? And I'll sort of address weird, anomalies. Sometimes I do like talking about these anomalies on Twitter, every so often when they pop up, because it's usually just not enough to talk about a full video or whatever, But, I don't know, hopefully this kind of gives people some insight into how, a playthrough or Let's Play channel kind of functions, especially if you're, I guess if you're just curious about it, or more so if you're interested in sort of maybe potentially running your own someday, right? But nonetheless, it's difficult kind of to quantify a lot of this, right? Because YouTube isn't exactly perfectly set up to accommodate Let's Plays. And I think maybe the easiest and biggest case in point is YouTube has kind of pushed this sort of, let's show someone a teaser or a preview or whatever, a video in their sidebar or whatever of a channel that they might be interested in, but has a lower viewership than they're used to, right? But maybe they'll take a chance on it and they'll find their new favorite or whatever, right? Overall, generally a good idea, but also doesn't work too well with something like a playthrough or Let's Play channel, right? Because you don't want to see part 164 of a Starfield playthrough or whatever, right? You don't want that. You want to start ideally at the beginning, right? Where everyone else gets started, right? So kind of weird to have it recommended in that way. But what can you do? There's some back-end stuff that they could make use of, but like I said, it's a lot of work on their end, and I guess they just don't want to do it quite yet. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe there could be any number of technical reasons behind the scenes that I don't know of, right? Or maybe they just suck. maybe they just suck. But regardless, we'll try and quantify this as best we can. There's really two ways in which we could do this. The first just being like, and obviously I don't think I can talk specifics on this, but generally on a month-to-month basis, what is like generating the most revenue? And then also what has not the most viewership, because of course that's very difficult to quantify, right? Because, you know, some playthroughs are super duper short, while others are 502 videos long, right? So thus it's difficult to quantify like, oh, this one is bringing in so and so many viewers or whatever this month or today or whatever, right? But I figured we can look at the first part of a playthrough, right? And sort of compare it in that sense, maybe, right? Because otherwise, you know, if we count any sort of playlist on the channel, like for instance, an interesting metric that I always bring up is shorts get loads of views, right? Even after the big shorts rush, wherein hardly anybody was making shorts, they were super duper ridiculously popular. They still kind of are, right? I still get a very large amount of viewership from shorts, including some of the older ones, right? Not quite what it used to be, but still, at least for myself, very much worth doing. Like I've remarked on before, the channel is kind of perfectly suited to just making easy shorts, and it's sort of a trade-off that I'm willing to do. Because, like I said, it's so easy. We're uniquely positioned to do it, so why not? It works as great like channel advertising. You'll hear no shortage of people saying like, oh, I found you through the shorts, and I got sucked in by the videos that I really enjoyed, or whatever, right? That's the intent behind it, because conversely, although shorts bring in a crap ton of viewership, you get pretty much no money off of them, right? Shorts are not making money for really anybody. The best way in which I guess you could monetize it is through some type of sponsorship or whatever. But, yeah, otherwise it's slim pickings, right? So thus anyone sort of specializing in just, this short form video, they're going to be suffering if they don't have anything else in their backlog to back it up, right? And like I said, in our case, it kind of perfectly feeds into each other because I just chop it directly from the original video. But that's where shorts would effectively end up here. Anyway, like I said, I can't talk specifics, but we can kind of go through a list. We'll go through 11. That way I can sort of include a fun one, that being in real life videos, right? Which is a fairly recent and new thing that we have started here on the channel. And it'll also, I think its inclusion can give some degree of, like I said, at least I don't think I can mention specifics, because I think that breaks terms of service. I think, like I said, I'm unsure about a lot of this, and I don't know. It's not as simple, I think, to just quickly look it up. I sent them an email before saying like, oh, can I just do this? And they gave me a whole bunch of conditionals in return. And, I don't know, maybe I'm just an idiot. But regardless, I'm going to try and play it safe here. Maybe there are other channels and stuff that you might want to refer to if you're interested in people playing it less safe, right? If you do want that information. But as far as generalities, as far as month to month, just money coming in from playthroughs, from a playlist, at the top of the list, of course. And this will sort of show off, right, how the length of a playthrough is going to heavily weight this, right? Like I said, we're trying our best here, but there's just no way around it, right? Obviously, at the top, there's you got a good idea of what'll be there, but we'll start from the bottom and work our way up, I think, because that'll be a little bit more fun. So starting from place number 11 on our channel, or on my channel, I guess. I don't know how I feel about using the royal we for that, right? It feels, I don't know. I'm hesitant to say, it almost feels manipulative, like, to the viewer, in saying like, oh yeah, we're all in this together or whatever, right? I do sort of feel weird about that, you know, like, is that leaning too much into the parasocial stuff? Which that's a whole topic for another video, because I think there's more nuance to that discussion than there often is, right? Like, generally tread carefully, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, that's for a future in real life video. Anyway, in place number 11 is a big surprise to me, Fable 1. Fable 1 actually is shockingly popular on the channel, right? Especially for its length, right? It was a fairly short playthrough, and yet it is here in place number 11 for income, for revenue, purely from ads. Pretty shocking to me. I would never have expected it. It was just kind of a fun one-off thing that I wanted to do because, you know, there's the Fable reboot, and I'm hopeful for that. And I have great memories of playing the first game. So Fable Anniversary in there at number 11. And if anything, another weird situation, another weird bit of anomalous data that we can sort of look at here, right? This is kind of a weird in real life video anyway, where we're talking about data and analytics, right? I can't expect many people to be into this, but Fable 1 has seen a somewhat significant uptick in popularity on the channel thanks to the new trailer for the Fable reboot, which I would not have expected. But sure enough, just that one trailer has resulted in a decent little uptick there, right? Big surprise. I would not have expected that, and similarly, I wouldn't have expected it to be so high up on the list, as it were. Coming in at number 10 is the in real life sort of playlist, right? It's not really a playthrough, right? So, which is why we're kind of taking it to 11. But I kind of wanted to throw it in there because I think it can offer some degree of perspective, sort of, I don't know, very, very interesting how it plays out. And I think one of the big contributing factors for the in real life videos being kind of popular in that sense is because, they're sort of overall widely accessible to a lot of different people, you know? People watch the channel for a lot of different games and a lot of different reasons and stuff. And the in real life video can kind of sometimes, right? Like I said, this is a bit more of a niche one because we're going into sort of like behind the scenes, sort of how to run a channel, if you will. But if you're here for like the CRPG slot, or if you're here because you really like Bethesda games, both of those types of people will find some common ground and interest in an in real life video. Hence why I think they're fairly popular. Anyway, speaking of CRPG slot, at number 9, like I'd mentioned, the Fallout TV show, really, we're still kind of riding that wave in a little bit of the sense. Fallout 2, they're at number 9. And at number 8, Fallout 1. Incredibly enough, I've got written down here a little list I'm referring to. Like I said, it was pretty wild to see the bump, but there you have it. Also, shockingly, and in some ways, I think this confirms the recency bias, because the first game will not be on this list, on the sort of revenue list or whatever, but Baldur's Gate 2 is at place number 7, miraculously enough. And like I said, I think that's mostly owed thanks to it being recent, you know. You still get sort of like a tail on a lot of these playthroughs, ideally, you know. Hopefully you have some kind of a tail on them. But Baldur's Gate 2, up there right now. Next up, shockingly enough, it is kind of surprising to me to see these up here still to this day, given the like bad audio quality, the bad mic quality, and sort of just my own experience with doing this, with making videos and whatnot. But Fallout New Vegas at number 6, wildly enough. Followed by both Morrowind Mondays, Volume 1 and 2 at number 5, and then Oblivion at number 4. Make no mistake, if you were thinking that Elder Scrolls would be popular on this channel, it's true. It's very much true. And at number 3, once again, sort of recency, being an integral part of this, Dragon's Dogma 2 in there at number 3. I think I would anticipate Dragon's Dogma 2 to sort of teeter off a fair bit there. right? I would expect that to perform about the same, if not a little bit lower than Elden Ring, right? Which has a big DLC coming up soon. But yeah, this sort of helps to illuminate, I guess, sort of the way in which the channel's niche operates and whatnot. But regardless, like I said, this one is kind of hard to quantify because some playthroughs are just longer, right? Some are just longer, if you feel what I'm building up to here. Anyway, at number 2, we've got Starfield, right? Starfield is actually our number 2 earner on the channel, despite for that type of game being in a bit more of a nascent period for its playthrough, I would hazard a guess. But yeah, Starfield actually doing quite well on the channel. I would say better than I would have thought. And honestly, I don't think I can talk specifics about, but doing better and better, right? Actually doing, like, relative to past periods of similar amounts of time, doing better and better, right? It continues to garner viewership and whatnot. Anyway, at number 1, the number 1 top spot, of course, obviously it's gotta be Skyrim, right? Already a sort of super popular game, and popular on the channel, right? Sort of my bread and butter has always been like Elder Scrolls and to a larger state, Bethesda games, and sort of multiplying on top of that, it's just a gigantic playthrough, right? It's just enormous. There's always people going through the Skyrim playthrough. Ideally, for any playthrough, there's always people going through them. But hey, I anticipate the Skyrim playthrough will be doing just fine for a long time to come. Anyway, we can shift over to viewership, which I think these sorts of ratings compared to the last one is a little fascinating, right? So, for viewership amounts, some of these, like I said, there's some recency bias. There's also weird anomalous data. This is not for the entire playthrough, right? Otherwise, it's super easy. We're sorting this by, like, when the first video of that playthrough shows up within my analytics of, like, okay, these are your most popular videos, right? When does, like, for instance, the Dragon's Dogma 2 playthrough show up? Is it the third most popular, right? And typically we're talking about, like, the first part of the playthrough, right? Part 1. Because, like I said, that's where most people get started. But, speaking of Dragon's Dogma 2, it is there at number 11. Like I said, some degree of recency bias. I expect it to sort of kilter off as time goes on. But, generally speaking, with this sort of channel, you want a healthy backlog for people who are interested in a certain specific type of niche, right? That's sort of the correct way, I think, to play it. And sort of also why it's kind of difficult to get started and get a foot in it nowadays. Early on, when it was less saturated, I would say playthroughs were, well, I mean, this is the case with any sort of videos, but early on, they're a lot easier to get into because you can sort of ride the wave of your recent videos. But these days, I feel like you're a little bit more dependent on a, like, healthy backlog, right? And having a healthy backlog sort of ensures that there's less sway with your own sort of income and thus and viewership and income, right? Because it can be a little scary, or if you're just bad at planning it, it helps to have that backlog where it's like, okay, I can pretty much count on this playthrough to do roughly this good over a period of time, right? I can sort of rely on that to be some basis of it, rather than it's sort of oscillating wildly, or like, oh no, I put out one video that was really bad and thus this month I'm kind of screwed. What can I do? Or not even that the video was bad, but that the topic was something that your audience wasn't terribly interested in, right? In this way also, this is, I think, one of the strengths of sort of a Let's Play playthrough channel, is that you kind of do have opportunity to take risks so long as you take, like, measured assessments, right? If you like analyze and look at, okay, I get that this probably won't be the most popular thing, but it'll have some degree of viewership on the channel or whatever, and it'll continue accruing viewership over time, right? It's all sort of about managed expectations and sort of judging like how they'll work out, I think. Like I said, this one, a lot of advice to other people sort of thinking about making a channel or just people who are curious. I don't expect this, like I said, managing expectations. I don't expect a lot of people to be interested in this in real life video this week. Anyway, at place number 10, like I said, some degree of riding the wave. Actually, the Fallout 4 Let's Revisit little mini series is actually number 10 as far as the first part of that being still popular, right? It was the 10th part 1 in our sort of popularity contest as far as just like getting viewership for the first part of it. Next up, at number 9. Now, this is interesting here, I think. And maybe, I'm not even sure why. It's very fascinating to me, right? Baldur's Gate 1 at number 9. Mind you, Baldur's Gate 1, not in the sort of like running for revenue, right? Not in there for the top 10 or top 11, sort of income generators for the channel, but it is at number 9 for viewership, right? For part 1. A lot of folks tuning in for Baldur's Gate 1, I guess, right? I think it's probably, if I had to guess, this is some anomalous data, is a lot of people sort of interested in trying and like taking an interest in Baldur's Gate 1 because of the popularity of Baldur's Gate 3. And sort of they get a taste for it, you know? You watch a few videos or whatever, you play a bit of the game yourself, right? Not even necessarily tied to the videos themselves, but maybe you jump into the game, you're like, oh man, I really love Baldur's Gate 3. How similar is the first game? Not very much, but there is some connective tissue that I'd love to know. But ultimately, you know, not everybody sees it to its finish, right? As it is with games, as it is with playthroughs, you see, start way up here and then it sort of teeters off and goes down, right? Kind of like a nice slope there. But to be expected, I suppose. Anyway, at number 8, actually, Morrowind, as far as our viewership is concerned. Morrowind Mondays Volume 2, having a good amount of popularity as per usual, sort of the long-standing, staple of the channel. Morrowind Mondays still going strong, still doing its thing there at number 8. And number 7 here, honestly not too far off from where it ranked on the revenue generation sort of end of things. Fallout New Vegas, right there at number 7. And then right in front of it at 6, Oblivion. Both generating a good amount of viewership this many years into the future from when I originally recorded them. Like I said, you still get people watching through those things. You still get people sort of leaving comments and whatnot. They still have some degree of popularity. It's great to see. Like I said, this is sort of the strength of having a long running, Let's Play channel with a lot of, like a healthy backlog. And ideally you have stuff that's sort of similar to each other. So that way when someone finishes something, they can sort of, you know, look back or look forward and see like, oh, you also did this one. That's sort of a game that's similar. And I'm into that as well. Right. And you know what? From watching this one, kind of like you said, I think I'll stick around for this, or I'll stick it out until you cover the next thing that I like. Right. Kind of works out on that idea. But those two still going strong. Frankly, I would love to re-record those. Because, like I said, the mic quality alone, let alone my own experience with sort of talking into a mic, but the quality of the mic has gone up immensely since those days. Pretty incredible, but hey, surprising nonetheless to me. Even more surprising, here at number 5, like I said, this thing is shockingly popular on the channel. I cannot believe it. Like I said, I have fondness for it myself, but I never anticipated it this way. At number 5 for viewership, part 1 of Fable Anniversary. I can't believe it, right? Fable Anniversary, for how long as well that playthrough is, that thing is putting in work, right? That's like the little train that could of the channel, I think. It is not something that I expected to be as high and as present on these lists as it is, but lo and behold, it's there, right? Fable 1, if you got a channel sort of like this, sort of like doing the same stuff that I'm doing, I gotta recommend it to you. You gotta try out this Fable thing, right? Really enjoyed it, of course, but yeah, such a surprise to me how well it did, and I don't know, really enjoyed it myself. I guess more crossover in that audience than I thought, which maybe shouldn't be as big a surprise to me, given the fact that that sort of crossover interest exists internally within myself, right? Very much interested in Fable and enjoyed the first one, and sort of, there's connective tissue there, I suppose. Anyway, in at number 4, and like I said, it's surprisingly, you wouldn't know it based on what you hear, but it continues to do a little bit better every month. It's Starfield. There at number 4, part 1 of Starfield is my 4th most viewed, sort of part 1 of a playthrough, right? Starfield right there. And, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that. So also, like I said, we're kind of riding a wave here, shockingly enough. And, man, it's number 3, our third most viewed part 1 of a playthrough is Fallout 1. Shoutouts to the sort of, I don't know, the CRPG slot, I guess, right? In a similar sense of, all right, let me walk this back, or rephrase this, I should say. I wanted to point out, I wanted to do the sort of viewership of like part 1. I wanted to also have this be like something that we kind of like touch on here in this video, if we're going over this sort of stuff. I definitely wanted to have this because, like I had mentioned, just looking at like raw revenue or income for the channel or whatever, based on the entire playlist, it massively favors a longer playlist, right? And as long as a lot of these CRPGs can go, somehow, some way, I've found longer games to play on the channel, right? Which is why, the number 1 spot, it's bound to be what you think it's going to be. But in this way, sort of showing off viewership for the first part of the playthrough, I think gives you a rough idea that, sure, the like CRPG slot isn't like making buku bucks or whatever, right? It still is in some degree in its own way, I don't know, sustainable, right? It's paid off as it is. But yeah, Fallout 1 actually, generating some degree of viewership and is fairly popular. Right. So at number 2, like I said, we were doing 11 parts because I thought it would be interesting to include these. It's actually the in real life video. Every so often we have one that just kind of pops off a little bit wildly, which, they're not exactly quite as timeless, I think, as a playthrough on a channel focused on playthroughs, right? But, like I said, this is kind of an interesting way, I thought, to include the in real life videos as a sort of way of recontextualizing this data that we're sort of looking at here, right? Because a couple weeks ago, the one in which I talked about, I think it was my favorite 3 playthroughs or whatever that I've ever done on the channel, that one ended up really picking up a lot of steam, right? That one ended up being fairly popular, and that is why it's at the number 2 spot. Otherwise, it would have been somewhere else. Definitely on this list for viewership, but probably not nearly as high. But like I said, sometimes they just pick up steam. Like I said, other times, like I'm saying with this one, I expect this one to be fairly niche, because this is sort of directed toward people who have some degree of interest in running a channel or whatever, which isn't as like wide reaching as other things on the channel or as other topics that we've covered. But yeah, like I said, hopefully it recontextualizes it, gives you some sort of idea in a situation where I can't really fully, at least as far as I know, I can't fully explain and talk about every minute detail. Anyway, at the number 1 slot, once again, is Skyrim for viewership. Skyrim, just like I said, it's an enormous playthrough. A lot of the shorts feed directly into the Skyrim playthrough as well, right? Because the playthrough is so long, it thusly has a lot of shorts tied to it, right? And because of the type of game that it is, unlike a CRPG, a lot of the stuff in the Skyrim playthrough works good for a short. You know, it sort of meshes well. It's sort of that right amount of slapsticky or observational comedy in sort of a way. It just plays better for a short for the sort of visual medium than a CRPG. But that's why it's at the top of both viewership and revenue lists here. Like I said, those are the lists, and hopefully this in some way helps, right? This was a viewer submitted question, sort of just asking specifically about Morrowind, which is on both of these lists at number 8 for viewership and 5 for revenue, combined Morrowind Mondays, volume 1 and 2. But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to extrapolate or expand upon sort of the question. That way it could hopefully be more useful to someone in some weird way. Hopefully it is. Like I said, I don't even know. This sort of making these advice videos for people interested in making their own channel isn't exactly my forte, but I figure, hey, I got data on hand, may as well try and get it out there in some fashion or another. But also, I think what's interesting here is it goes to show, I don't know, just how not only that there's these weird anomalies, right? Like with the Fallout show or the Fable trailer somehow causing there to be an uptick in Fable anniversary viewership, but just sort of the importance of maintaining and having a healthy backlog on a channel such as this, wherein it's like super chill and casual viewing. You know, you just load up a playlist and sort of just listen along or whatever, right? Oftentimes while you're playing the game, how many times during a playthrough do I comment or mention, hey, there's a good chance that while I'm playing this game, you have this on like a second screen experience, right? It's kind of fun to do. I do the same thing to this day. But yeah, hopefully in some way you can garner some information. I think by far the most important bit of information and key takeaway that I would say to anyone looking for advice in this realm would be, if you are doing a playthrough channel or whatever, it's really tough to do variety, right? To just do complete variety. It is so difficult, because people come to expect a certain thing from you, right? They come to your channel, with sort of the idea oh, this person sort of specializes in role-playing games. Well, how more defined can you get that? Well, okay, this person has, in my case, I have a proclivity, obviously, for BGS games, and games that are very similar to BGS games. You'll notice here on my lists, there is no Elden Ring, right? On either of these. Elden Ring does okay on the channel, right? But it is not in the top 11 of either of those two. Elden Ring ain't up there. I expect we'll see a bit of an uptick with the DLC, but it ain't on there. Sekiro, not on there. Doom 2016 and Eternal, fantastic games, fantastic playthroughs. I don't know about fantastic playthroughs because they're very focused on the gameplay, I would say, on sort of shooting dudes. But just not sort of in the overlap for the channel. Something like a more narrative experience performs way better on the channel, right? Something similar to our sort of two big, I don't know what you would call them, our two big niches on the channel are sort of the ideal realm to sort of operate within. That being these sorts of Bethesda-like role-playing games and CRPGs, right? Anything very narrative heavy or anything very CRPG heavy or CRPG focused, tends to do well on the channel. The numbers prove out. You can even see it here, wherein stuff like Baldur's Gate 1 doing decently on the channel, Fallout 1 doing decently enough on the channel, stuff like that. And like I said, from there, ideally, you have people you start to build up that audience, folks who are interested in like, oh, I love watching this person play CRPGs. Whenever they start covering a CRPG that I'm also into, I'll definitely check them out, right? Or, oh my gosh, I love this person for how they cover Bethesda games. And whenever they do a new one or something like that, or one that they really enjoy, even if that's like, oh, I really only like Elder Scrolls, or I really only like Fallout or whatever, there's overlap, right? You want to get as much overlap as possible. That's why folks always say, finding your niche is important, right? This is what they mean. Hopefully this data, as vague as it has to be, I think, helps prove that out, helps deliver that message, right? It's so difficult to do variety. Sort of find a niche, and also this is the difficult part. Just because you found a niche, there needs to be some, I don't know, popularity, some demand within that niche, right? Otherwise you're in for a rough ride. Like, for instance, if you niche down too much, right? If you're like, I only want to play games from the Sega Genesis that are in some way a role-playing game, right? You're going to run into difficulty there, because from the onset, it's not that popular, right? You want to sort of do a balance between how saturated is this, how much potential viewership is in this area, how interested are you in this area, right? Because obviously, if you're interested in it, you're going to want to do it longer and probably better, right? You're going to be able to be wittier about it in whatever realm you're doing, even if it's not playthroughs. If you're covering like the lore, or doing guides on how to, or even covering like updates and news, if it's more of a live service situation, your own enjoyment factors in immensely in your own ability to like not burn out and find longevity within that niche, right? So in that sense, like I said, it's just a big balancing act for the degree of popularity, how narrow you want the niche to be, and as well your own enjoyment of it, right? And I don't know. In this case, I'm pretty fortunate. I'm playing a lot of the games, and we're doing a lot of playthroughs for a lot of things I like. They do well enough to where we're doing this all right, right? At least for the time being. We'll see how things look in the distant future, but I would hazard a guess that we'll be just fine. That ought to do it for now, I suppose. As I had mentioned before at the start of this one, this one turned out to be a lot longer than I expected. I thought that I would just read out these names, these 22 names real quick, but it turned out to be a lot longer. I guess sort of in a sense to try and find, I don't know, the lesson, the takeaway here. Anyway, like I said, hopefully it helps if you're sort of in the market, so to speak, for this kind of advice or input, right? Hopefully you can garner something from this. Anyway, that ought to do it for now. Feel free to submit more general viewer submitted questions. Like I said, helps if you get a question mark in there. We'll add them to the list, and as was alluded to before, we've also got plenty of other topics that aren't even viewer submitted that are in the queue, and frankly, some that I need to write down lest I forget them. Anyway, we'll be spinning up some new stuff here soon, right? Like we said, Fallout sure is popular. If you've seen on Twitter, we got something coming up soon. All right, until next time, please take care of each other.